れゆく夜の蝶怪しく惑わせて欲情も愛情も純恋歌にカムロチョ優しく夜に抱かれ涙ほろりほろり舞い散る雪は飾る人で汚れた街でさえも花咲いても花散るとも眩しい雪月花ありがとうございました。Before we get into Yakuza 3, we have to understand the circumstances surrounding its production. 3 technically isn't the next entry in the series. Ryuga Gotoku Kenzan was the first Yakuza on the PS3 and never saw a release outside of Japan. Kenzan was an opportunity for Nagoshi and the Ryuga Gotoku studio to make important updates to the technology they were using and have a change of pace from the series' setting and plot structure. And if the production of Kenzan could be defined by any one word, changes would be it. Director Ryuta Ueda would be succeeded by Daisuke Sato, a lead designer from the first 2 Yakuzas. Sato was a series veteran and he'd be taking charge of development as the series' star author was on his way out. Hase Seishu departed from Yakuza after 2's release, leaving one lead writer, Masayoshi Yokoyama, to continue overseeing Yakuza's storytelling. In a dev diary interview he did for GameSpot leading up to Yakuza 3's Western release, Nagoshi explained part of his method for delivering the human drama that inspired him to create the series.
ヒューマンドラマなので、人の表情をどう撮るかとか、人のアクションをどう撮るかとかいうことをすごくこだわった絵作りに、龍が如くの場合はなってると思います。
That insistence on facial expressions was now a Yakuza trademark, and with Cyberware's Magical V engine, they were about to get even better. The Magical V engine didn't just use lip syncing for animation, it also matched the tone of the speaker's voice to generate full facial expressions using what Cyberware called unique wrinkle shader technology. This new tech would certainly speed up development, a boon to Yakuza's incredibly short production cycles. Kenzan was no exception to these deadlines. It was released in March of 2008, just a little over a year after Yakuza 2's release, and only a few months after 2 came out in the West. That's not a lot of time to transition onto a new console, especially considering developing for the PS3 was like performing surgery on a space alien compared to the PS2. Nevertheless, it was a success in Japan, and Sega was so happy with its burgeoning new IP that it must have greenlit Yakuza 3 well before the creative team had put the gold stamp on Kenzan. Because Yakuza 3 had an 8-month production cycle, with 3 weeks of project planning, even with numerous staff changes and relatively little time with new technology. But sure enough, Yakuza 3 was released in Japan on February 26, 2009, less than a year after Kenzan. This industry has a problem. Our story begins in Okinawa, the open sea, the gentle crashing of waves on the shore, a Haruka that hasn't been kidnapped. Oh, no wait, that's just the wind. Who else emerges from those tranquil waters but one Kiryu Kazuma, now the manager of an orphanage, a father to a family of his own. And is that a... hold on a sec. Computer! Enhance. Yes. According to the data, we can confirm that he is indeed smiling. He is... Oh, he's just been told that someone's been shot, and there it goes. Meanwhile, in Tokyo, Daigo Dojima, current chairman of the Tojo clan, pulls out of a major business deal relating to a plot of land in Okinawa. I wonder which one.
登場界は4代目に何度も救われてきた。その人から居場所を奪うことはできねえ。
On his return to Tojo headquarters, he discovers that he has an impossible guest, Shintaro Kazama, Kiryu's father and most certifiably dead. I'm dead. See? I wouldn't lie to you. Shintaro insists that Daigo take the Okinawa deal, handing him the deed to the plot of land the orphanage rests on, but Daigo refuses.
3万人の構成員を養うにはそんなことは言ってらんないでしょう。
それでも俺が断ると言ったら。
それは困りましたね。
Back in Okinawa, Kiryu and friends rush to the hospital to check on the boss, a character we haven't been introduced to yet. While trying to figure out who the shooter was, the boss's daughter, Saki, hands Kiryu a portrait of the man she saw shoot her father.
これって兄貴、こいつ兄貴が知ってる人なんですか？
ああ、俺の死んだ親父、風間のおやっさんだ。
Yakuza 3 begins in medias res and establishes all of its mysteries. Little ones like, how does Kiryu know these guys and who's their boss? And big ones like, why is this land deal so important? And how is Shintaro Kazama alive? Some of these questions are answered through the incredibly long flashback sequence Yakuza 3 throws us into. It's been almost 2 years since we've seen Kiryu. The flashback chapters, as I call them, focus on his life after his bout with Ryuji Goda and the Jingwan Mafia, his entrusting the protection of Daigo and the Tojo to Majima, his goodbyes to Sayama before she leaves for America, and most importantly, his life as a father. 6 months after the events of Yakuza 2, a peaceful Kiryu takes care of a group of orphans as though they were his own. He helps them through their problems, ensures their safety, and with a tenderness we've never seen, not even with Haruka, genuinely loves them.
わかった。私、頑張る。
ああ、俺はお前のお父さんにはなれない。でもお前がこの朝顔に来た時から家族だと思っている。
Oh, my beating heart! Remember the lost fatherhood idea I implanted in your head during Yakuza 1? Kiryu's excommunication also takes away the opportunity to start his own family within the clan, and that metaphor is pretty blatant. Yakuza might share themes of family with Dragon Quest, but it's cynical and uses it to highlight the tragedies many of us go through. Kiryu has lost his family, and with it, the world as he knew it. Yeah, that one. To Kiryu, this is paradise. He's overcome his guilt, he's taking care of Haruka, and he's fulfilled in his sense of purpose. Kiryu's relationship with his children is proof of his change. He's softer, he smiles for Pete's sake, and he's showing a sense of vulnerability we've never seen in him before. When his paradise is threatened, he kind of just wants to talk it out.
約束だ。お前の親父のところに案内してもらおうか。
His less aggressive nature allows Kiryu to quickly bond with the local Ryuda clan. They share a sense of integrity and over the course of the flashback chapters help one another out. It's here Kiryu's bond with a young man named Rikiya and a life lesson the Dragon of Dojima will never forget begins.
だからここは兄貴しか収められねえと。
ちょっと待て。
はい？
さっきから聞いていると、俺のことを兄貴兄貴って何言ってるんだ。
だって兄貴は兄貴じゃないですか。
お前は流動一家の若頭だろう。俺はお前の兄貴分でも何でもない。
まあ、その話はいいとして。
What we're seeing is a Kiryu who's making friends, not allies in some kind of underworld drama. He hasn't had this kind of relationship since before he went to prison. He's hesitant to grow closer to people because he's struggling with the intimacy.
杯を交わしてくれ。
と言ってもな、俺はもう極道じゃねえんだ。
そんなことは関係ねえ。要は俺があんたに惚れたってことだけだ。それで十分。
勝手な話だな。
売借人もいねえが我慢してくれ。頼む。
By the time we find ourselves in present day again, we've come to know a different Kiryu. A supportive father figure seeking to help others, emotionally available for the people around him, and clear of mind. On his mission to protect the orphanage and find answers about the man in the drawing, Kiryu returns to Kamurocho. Lead designer for Yakuza 3, Kazuki Hosokawa, spoke in a Sega-produced interview about Kamurocho having to be completely rebuilt.
前は客観視点で街中の移動とかやってたんですけども、龍が如く3から初めてその追従のカメラになって、街中どこ見ても問題ないようにっていう作りにしなきゃいけなかったので、まるっと全部作り直したのがえらい大変だった。
Fixed camera angles were done away with for a rotatable camera centered on Kiryu. In other words, players were about to get up close and personal with the city they'd only ever seen from a distance. Buildings were made much taller and wider to portray the scale previous entries in the series had implied from above. The ads and store signage were at higher resolutions to better reflect the distance players would be staring at them from. Interiors had to accurately reflect the size of the building, and store shelves were filled with recognizable brands. In essence, this Kamurocho was larger than the model of Kamurocho players previously walked through. Everything was big. Even Kiryu's suit looked big on him. New scale gave the team golden opportunities. Bigger sidewalks and alleys allowed them to fill the new space with more cars on the street, extra details like bicycle and magazine racks, and functional crosswalks with traffic signs. Readable signage gave Nagoshi the go-ahead to secure a total of 27 product tie-ins, including Okinawan restaurants and real hostess bars. The bigger interiors gave much-needed breathing room to the convenience stores and restaurants, and more NPCs could sit around those locations, creating a livelier atmosphere. Character models were given visual upgrades since they were closer to the camera, but more importantly, they interacted with their environment more. The bustling crowds of Kamurocho had destinations to get to, would make stops to browse magazine selections, and wait at the corner of streets for friends before heading out together. In Okinawa, the same crowds will actually wait for traffic signals and utilize the crosswalks. The active NPCs hit enemies within the environment better, giving players trying to avoid combat a run for their money. These weren't incredibly significant changes to the environment, but were necessary to make Kamurocho feel as lifelike as it had been in previous installments. Not noticing a big difference is the point. Turning Kamurocho into a true 3D space, maintaining its sense of scale despite changes in presentation, and not losing the general atmosphere in the process, on an 8-month production cycle? That's impressive. Players gained control of Kiryu and Kamurocho, but it's the made-up Okinawan town of Ryukyu where true exploration starts. Within a couple of hours, you'd already be familiar with it. The tourist town was divided between the southern shopping and northern entertainment districts, and separated elements of gameplay between different sections of town. Minigames and side activities in the north, and the shops and coin lockers in the south. Ryukyu also played around with putting shops on second floors and using a large interior with multiple levels as a smaller sandbox complete with random encounters. Why this is important? Kamurocho has an established shape. It had been that shape for 2 games already, and it stayed that way because it was useful to keep it that way. Second locations like Ryukyu and Sotenbori allowed the team developing the series to explore ideas they could implement into Kamurocho's level design. With that new 3D camera, there needed to be a space to build around it that wasn't Kamurocho in order to learn how to best go about using it. Ryukyu had moving traffic, it had bigger streets, it played with height, and it showcased more of what Yakuza could do in an urban environment. Kamurocho was like coming home. It was exactly the same, with a few newly opened facilities and some old businesses no longer accessible. Like always, players were watching Kamurocho grow and change within the boundaries of its set shape. In a sense, Kiryu and Kamurocho are one and the same, gaining some new attributes and losing others without becoming unrecognizable.
あいつはここに置いていく。今のカムロ町は危険すぎる。あいつを連れて行くわけにはいかない。
It's worth mentioning the emphasis Yakuza 3 puts on brotherhood and mutual trust. When he decides to head to Kamurocho without Rikiya, Kiryu is doing so to protect someone he's grown close to. Who can blame him? The last two people to call Kiryu Aniki suffered for it. He values the intimacy he shares with Rikiya, partly because it reminds him of Nishiki and Shinji, but he understandably fears losing a connection like that again. The narrative introduces its antagonists, the current captains of the Tojo clan, and great opposites to the themes of Brotherhood Yakuza 3 represents. Hamazaki, a racist with a penchant for violence, Kanda, a sex weirdo with no respect for personal boundaries, and Mine, a capitalist. Kashiwagi, acting chairman and longtime member of the Tojo, also known to many, and by many I mean myself, as that guy with a cool-ass scar on his face, explains to Kiryu the current situation in the Tojo, the man Daigo met with before being shot and is gunned down by unknown assailants at the top of Millennium Tower. He tells Kiryu to find the man in the drawing before passing away. Of course, the police take one look at Kiryu and immediately assume he's a suspicious looking character, so our man books it down the streets of Kamurocho until he runs into a familiar face.
Date-san.
Date takes Kiryu to New Serena, where he further breaks down each of our three villains, explaining that he's no longer a police detective, but an investigative journalist. Because male intimacy is an important theme here, we're also being reintroduced to the intimate relationships Kiryu still has. And if Serena was in shambles to reflect Kiryu's mind in Yakuza 2, its renewed lease and appearance is a given. New upholstery, new management, new furniture. Kiryu is not the broken man he was in Yakuza 2. He's better put together, he's smarter, he's classier. Eventually, Rikiya catches up with him and they team up to find the Tojo captains and get some answers. Let's talk about homoeroticism. Get it? They're not afraid of love. That's really cute. Kiryu's relationship with Rikiya is integral to what makes Yakuza 3 powerful storytelling. It's also pumped full of homoerotic undertones. When they first meet, Kiryu is exceptionally lenient with Rikiya compared to how he would treat any other thug picking a fight with him.
どうだ内地の腰抜けのおっさんのパンチは痛かったが
This fight is an icebreaker. You see this face? This is not the face of an angry person. This is the face of someone who's impressed. Afterwards, Rikiya takes Kiryu to meet Nakahara, the Ryudo family's boss, and essentially his father. Those early chapters of getting to know Rikiya are a period of courting.
よくない。お前みたいなやつに兄貴と呼ばれたら、うちの子供たちに悪影響だろうが。
別にいいじゃないですか。俺は兄貴の強さと男気に惚れたんです。俺にとって兄貴は兄貴なんです。
There's a subtextual romance occurring between these two, a powerful love that drives Rikiya to stay by Kiryu's side, and Kiryu to keep Rikiya out of harm's way at every opportunity.
明日の夜、沖縄を立とう。今日は事務所に戻って支度でもしてこい。
はい。
はるか。リキヤのことも頼んだ。
I mean, there's even a love song playing during this scene. Yakuza 3 so badly wants you to know this is intentional, it drops a tongue-in-cheek hint when Kiryu and Rikiya make their way to interrogate Kanda, who's been hiding out at a love hotel.
ねえおばちゃん。
はい。
カップルじゃなきゃダメなんですよね。
そうですよ。
いや、私と兄貴はラブラブなカップルだから問題ないでしょ。
おい。
あんたたちそうだったの。
This gag is somewhat representative of their relationship coming to fruition. After Kanda turns out to be a dead end, Kiryu stresses to Rikiya how dangerous this could be, but Rikiya refuses to leave, begging Kiryu to let him stay.
もしお前があの絵の男を見つけ出したとしても 絶対に一人では動かないでくれ。約束できるか？
はい。
よし。それじゃあ今日は一杯飲もう。お前にこの街を案内してやる。
This is an exchange of trust between two people who deeply care about each other, an engagement, if you will. It's the breakthrough moment for Kiryu. Through his relationship with Rikia, he learns to trust in someone else, to depend on someone else. Our speculation is later confirmed when Kiryu asks Rikia to head back to Okinawa, but this time because the land deal is approaching completion and someone needs to protect the orphanage.
でも、
いいから言うことを聞いてくれ。今はまだあの絵の男が俺たちの敵なのか味方なのかわからない。今は沖縄に帰って崎や朝顔の連中の面倒を見てやってほしい。わかったか？
はい。
Remember how important Kiryu's kids are to him. For Kiryu to give someone else the task of protecting the orphans and Haruka, that person would have to be deeply special to him. It would have to be someone he loved and someone he knew loved him back.
Surprise, motherfucker!
Oh right, there's a whole other plot happening. I forgot.
うちの政治部のスクープです。ついに防衛大臣のタミヤが民事党と沖縄県議会をまとめたようなんです。
Date informs Kiryu of the land deal's completion and reveals that Majima might have had a hand in helping its advancement. Determined to get some answers, Kiryu sets back out onto Kamurocho's streets. But what if he got distracted and played 20 hours of Mahjong instead? Asking for a friend. Not that you could play Mahjong in the Western Yakuza 3 release on the PS3. Mahjong, Shogi, the Aroma Massage, and the Hostess Bar minigames were all removed from Yakuza 3's Western release due to, you guessed it, time constraints! A little after this was announced, a PR representative at Sega responded to a Gotoku article on the matter. They wrote, "We had a tight schedule to abide by for localizing and releasing Yakuza 3 in the West. Due to the limited time we were given, we had to leave certain bits of the game out, and we chose portions we felt didn't resonate with Western culture." This statement was released about a month after the managing director for Sega Australia at the time threw fans under the bus in regards to Yakuza's Western success. In a lot of cases, we have a strong vocal group of fans who demand the opportunity to play these games in their local markets and are very outspoken in their support. However, when the time comes, they are reluctant to stay committed and actually make the purchase. And this is a horrible thing to say. Given Yakuza's shaky relationship with localization and said localization's historically mixed reception since Yakuza 1, blaming fans outside of Japan for the lack of success was probably not the best way to go about gaining new ones. Sega's early mismanagement of Yakuza's localization was likely the cause of Western fans losing out on several degrees of content, entire games technically belonging to the series and fundamental to its growth in some cases. But localization did get better. The team responsible was, hopefully, given the resources and time to produce quality translations for future titles, enough to eventually see Yakuza 3 Remastered as part of the Yakuza Remastered Collection in 2020, about a decade after the original release. The Yakuza Remastered Collection brought Yakuza 3, 4, and 5 to the PS4, along with more faithful adaptations of the original text and a slew of improvements over the original. In Yakuza 3's case, all of the cut content was brought back except for a Japanese trivia show also removed from the Japanese Remastered Collection, and a few sub-stories that were incredibly offensive and poorly thought out. And it's a good thing we now have a complete version of Yakuza 3 in the West. If Yakuza 2 was an improvement on the combat engine and the narrative devices in the series, Yakuza 3 was an improvement of the content itself. Everything you could do in the city was improved. Bowling didn't change much, but better physics made it easier for players to find their sweet spots. The AI might have been toned down too, since NPCs were easier to play against. Watch me school this 12-year-old! BAM! You ain't got shit, Haruka! No skills, no family, no future! The crane game was a lot harder. Prizes could collide with other prizes and be forced out of the claw on their way to the drop-off bin. Mahjong, Shogi, and the Aroma Massage minigame were more or less identical to their Yakuza 2 counterparts, except Yakuza 3 introduced a ranked Mahjong league. I, of course, spent an embarrassing amount of time climbing to the top of the in-game leaderboard and lost the respect of all my peers in the process. The driving range and batting cages were fused into a new and improved form of the batting minigame. A digital pitcher was added to give players a better idea of when the pitch was coming. It was still reaction-based, but with the added challenge of aiming the control stick in the direction of a target you wanted the ball to hit. Subsequent difficulties added more, smaller targets and played around with their spacing. It was possible to line your shot up so that it tagged multiple targets, and if you managed to hit targets consecutively, a bingo target would pop up for a chance to score huge points. Keeping the analog stick steady during the pitch and your swing was harder than it sounds. Eyeing down a particular target also altered your view of the ball, challenging your sense of timing, and the tension of reacting to the pitch clashed against your insistence on keeping your other thumb steady on the analog stick. That sensation frighteningly mimicked the feeling you'd get being at bat in a real-life baseball game, and made for a fun and surreal mini-game. They threw a whole damn 9-hole golf course into Yakuza 3. Golfing felt stiff but enjoyable. Sometimes it felt like the golf ball wasn't rolling as much as it should, it was tough to gauge exactly how much power was behind each swing. An actual golf course was still a step up from a driving range though. Watching Kiryu's reactions to a good and bad score at every hole was a fun plus.
Yosh.
I did it all by myself!
Bars finally had bar games to play inside them. Pool tables and dartboards fleshed out the spacious interiors and came complete with multiple rule sets and staff members to play against. Those new product placement deals included Karaoke-kan, a karaoke bar chain which provided the perfect excuse to add a karaoke rhythm game. The song list consisted entirely of original music by Yakuza 3's composers, including Kamurocho Lullaby, the song you heard my sweet dulce tones singing a few moments ago. Some songs had multiple versions with different singers in order to better fit whichever character was going to be singing it. Here's an added bonus though, Yakuza now had original in-universe music that could play over the speakers at restaurants or convenience stores, so after players spent time doing some karaoke, they would then hear Kamurocho Lullaby playing at a restaurant in-game with the original vocals playing instead of Kiryu's. A wonderfully organic touch for the world building of Yakuza, but also further distinguishing Kiryu by giving him a unique singing voice. Oh, I'm taking a minute to decompress from this section. Yeah, it's no doubt the slowest segment by far, but it's because Yakuza 3 added so much to Kamurocho. I thought about leaving it out and bringing it up in the next video, but I wasn't sure if it was going to be in the next game or if someone was going to call me out in the comments or I'd forget to talk. What? Right outside Kiryu's orphanage was a beautiful beach full of fish you could catch and then sell for a nice profit. All you needed was bait in your inventory and you were good to go. Cast your line, wait for a bite, and reel the sucker in while keeping an eye on the strain of your line and the direction the fish was swimming. You needed to match your rod's movement with the fish and know when to stop reeling or give the line some more slack depending on the behavior of your prey. Without Ryukyu being a secondary location, fishing probably wouldn't have made it into Yakuza 3. It wasn't far from other fishing minigames of its era, but it was the first non-city activity we saw in Yakuza. For the series, it was unorthodox, but it inspired future installments to play around with what they could get Kiryu to do. Slot machines were no longer playable, but the casinos and gambling dens hosting roulette, blackjack, and dice games were still around. The gambling dens added matches of Hanafuda, a neat little card game about matching cards and constructing special sets out of the ones you've matched together. You could always use the money you made fishing to go gambling, but there's really no guarantee that you'd win, and I think you know where this is going. I'm kidding. I used a cheat item for that one. Club Sega's carried Boxelios, a shoot-'em-up arcade title replacing the first-person fighting game from Yakuza 2. In Boxelios, the only threat was your own accuracy and a very short timer. The goal was to shoot the glowing spot on as many big goo orbs as you could before the timer hit 0. If you were fast enough, you could shoot down the enemy during a grace period at the start of every level when the timer was frozen. The more accurate you were, the less time you spent, the more levels you completed. Each enemy had a harder sweet spot to nail. A balance of correctly positioning and anticipating their movement was needed to hit them quickly and save time on the clock. Boxelios was engrossing because it was quick. It took maybe 3 minutes for a full playthrough, and it was so easy to hit replay and try again to make it a level 50. It even had its own online leaderboard back in the day. Honestly, Boxelios should have gotten a standalone release on Steam or PSN or something. It's that good.
Fuck. There's so much.
Managing the club and being a host yourself were gone from Yakuza 3, but in their place was expanded hostess dating and a hostess management minigame. Yes, that does sound worse than it is. Kiryu could recruit new hostesses in Ryukyu and train them to become the ultimate upseller. Similar to club management, he could snoop around the club to get an idea of what kind of woman the clientele were looking for, and then give the hostess a total makeover to match. You had to manage each hostess's motivation and stress, and train her in maintaining her looks, her smarts, and her charisma, all the while dressing her up to match the desired parameters guests were hoping to see. Using hints well generated more revenue for Kiryu to spend on updating the hostess's style, her grace, her face. Okay, so it's almost as bad as it sounds. Hostess management became a game about min-maxing your hostess's loadout to prioritize 1 or 2 qualities guests were looking for. It was a total time killer, but gave out solid experience points, and I had a lot of fun with it. The idea of Kiryu working with these everyday people to swindle creepy men out of their money was a good time. Yakuza always makes an effort to be frank about the less reputable side of Japanese nightlife, and the hostess bars are a great example of seeing it from the other side of the transaction. With hostess dating, heart meters were doubled to 20 hearts per hostess, and conversations between the ladies and Kiryu were longer and more personal. Hostesses weren't the walls to bounce Kiryu's character off like they were in Yakuza 2. They had developing storylines players would learn about, and dates tied into club conversations, compounding into chunky sub-stories. Completing each hostess's sub-story unlocked the boss fight hostess. Look, she's got a tiara, that's how you know she's the final boss. All final bosses wear tiaras. Ganondorf, 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 the evidence is sound. It was through the hostess activities that Kiryu's willingness to help others became apparent.
人のために何かをしなきゃいけない決められない部分もあるし、その中でこうなんだろうな。ただたくましくはなっていったかなと思うので、
Negoshi here is confirming some of what I've already pointed out about Kiryu, and allows us to further those initial thoughts using the larger chunks of writing present in Yakuza 3. It's evolving sub-stories. Sub-stories became chains of larger stories involving Kamurocho's weirdos. Their extended dialogue sequences and long-term results made it necessary to develop these characters into characters, to give them character arcs and quirks to recognize them by. Even the one-off sub-stories played out with special cutscenes or were specific challenges. Kiryu could get picked up by a film crew to fill in for the starring actor in their movie's final action scene, or become Phoenix Wright for a day and find the killer in a 7-year-old murder mystery. Even chasing off paparazzi as the celebrity bodyguard was a satisfying difference in Yakuza 3's sub-story design. They were marked on the map now and didn't force you to immediately start them. You could save your game and come back. Even so, failing sub-stories with incorrect dialogue choices was still possible. The further Yakuza went on, the less and less you wanted to see a sub-story end the wrong way with no going back to fix it aside from reloading. 3 was much bigger than previous entries and made it difficult to satisfy players with partial sub-story completion or to wait until a new game plus to try again. It's important to think of Yakuza 3 as the kind of game you could hang out in. Maybe you flip it on, mess around the city for a few hours, end up playing pool for the 3rd time ever, and bam! A sub-story falls into your lap about a man challenging you to billiards. The girth of content may have been intended to be taken at a relaxed pace. It could also be seen as a relaxed state of mind for Kiryu. The longer investment of his time towards those specific people and his willingness to help out was a big change from the sub-story design of 2. This was not a begrudging Kiryu. This Kiryu felt like he could make a difference if he cared enough. This Kiryu wanted to help see these people through to a better situation. The Hitman missions captured these desires and plainly put them on display. They were a super huge sub-story with a developing plot revolving around an organization of ex-Yakuza assassins and non-linear completion. Working for an organization dedicated to rehabilitating ex-Yakuza back into normal lives, Kiryu challenges, defeats, and convinces the would-be hitmen to walk away from their return to crime. players witnessed him make an effort to help others through what he went through. Even if they are his enemies, this version of Kiryu is focused on finding a solution inspiring change in them. Kiryu finally meets with Majima, learns more about the land deal, and comes face to face with Mine.
Kanda! これはどういうことだ?
We learn about Mine's relationship with Kanda and can observe that it's devoid of the trust and love we see between Kiryu and Rikiya. Mine challenges Kiryu's outlook and establishes that he aims to save the Tojo by any means necessary. He calls Kiryu a coward for trying to hold on to sentimentalities like the orphanage.
自分が背負った立場が分かってない。ボランティアでもされている気分なんでしょうね。意味のないことを偽善だ。何?
Kiryu's response to Mine's threats isn't murderous intent. It's about telling Mine he's wrong about how he conducts himself. Simply put, Kiryu knows better.
Mine, お前何か見失ってるぜ。
何をです？
それは俺がいつか教えてやる。
あなたから教わることなんか何もありませんよ。
Then the writers forgot that they had less than a year to finish the game, and way too many plot points to get through. Chapter 9, The Plot. Is the plot? Seriously. Kiryu and Date meet with one of the politicians of the land deal, and I shit you not, the entire chapter is sitting across the table from this guy, asking a bunch of questions and getting long-winded answers about all of the mysteries set up earlier.
俺は初めから通す気がなかったからだ。
なんだと?
あの世界大恐慌の引き金になったニューヨーク株式市場の株価大暴落を。
なんだと?
そんな簡単なもんじゃない。アンドレ・リチャードソンを中心とした
なんだと?
基地拡大の最大の目的は。
なんだと?
そんなものが沖縄に。
なんだと?
俺には全く興味がない。
なんだと? なん一応だと? なんだと?
あんたの知っている風間ってのは
なんだと?
そいつが堂島大吾を撃ったのか。
なんだと?
ああ。
なん
風間ジョージ、お前のいた東上会の元幹部、風間組組長、風間慎太郎の実の弟だ。
おやっさんに弟が？
知らなかったのか。
ああ、
そうか。
なんだと?
血を分けたただ一人の兄弟。
なんだと?
何者にも代え難い存在だったからだ。
なんだと? なんだと? なんだと?
Forget about chewing the scenery. This scenery was swallowed. This scenery was digested. This scenery was a bowel movement. The point is, Kiryu needs to stop Black Monday, a terrorist organization, and that means stopping your dad's twin brother, who is in the CIA, from killing this politician's ex-apprentice, who's in Okinawa right now, who is working with this other politician to push that base resort deal that this politician doesn't actually want to happen because it was all a ploy to get Black Monday out of hiding somehow because I guess they want to hack the missile defense system for something. And yeah, all the information I just gave you is provided to us for the first time during this conversation. Also, that racist guy we never met disappears off camera. Also, Mine's behind it all. We find out that he's an orphan who lost his father figure at a young age. Without people around him to care for him, Mine became who he is. Cold, calculating. He understands loyalty and honor, but he has no problem using others as a means to an end. To Mine, people are either assets or obstacles. And just like that, almost all the mysteries are gone, and it's time for a plan of action. It's time for...
Fucking somebody up!
Some of his old moveset carried over into Yakuza 3, but most of Kiryu's new abilities focused on building heat, retaining heat when taking damage, and moves that altered enemy positions to create new heat opportunities. The flow of combat was such that savvy players could chain different moves into combos. You could, for instance, perform a rush combo that bounces an enemy off the ground, which lets you get 2 heavy kicks in, and then grab them to use a heat move or stomp their head in. Thanks to character models looking and feeling a lot heavier, heat moves were visceral and hitting enemies had a greater sense of impact. Players were constantly fed a steady amount of opportunities to unlock more heat moves in order to create the desire to perform them whenever they could. Kiryu was able to experience revelations by spotting the unusual during his adventures around town, triggering wacky QuickTime events and inspiring him to create his own heat moves. He could also train under Master Komaki or fight the memories of past opponents inside his virtual reality mind palace for heat moves and other special abilities. Equipable weapons and weapon modding were retooled to better serve heat moves by making modded weapons repairable after using up their durability. Modded items provided unique bonuses or possessed special traits, making them practical to have on hand or for a fun laugh, like these little booties that meow whenever Kiryu moves around. Bringing in 3 modded weapons and 3 modded pieces of equipment into fights made a huge difference in shortening their length by increasing the rate Kiryu could build heat. Modded weapons were good for building it up. They had longer rush combos and therefore had an easier time breaking through enemy guards, and even came with special heat moves of their own. Yakuza 3 marked the point in the series where Nagoshi and all those involved realized where the strength of the combat system was, building heat and unleashing horrifying mayhem on your enemies. They were starting to notice a few quirks about the combat system. Mainly tactics like my tested and proven hot potato strategy were undefeatable. By focusing on the spectacle and rewarding it with extra experience, players would want to discover new heat moves or do the cool thing. They created a sensation where even though there was a bread and butter combo to see you through most fights, the cooler move was what mattered. The cool thing would be cool as heck! And then you can complete all the sub-stories, get the golden gun, and turn every fight into a shooting gallery! Kiryu's fighting style had adapted from a berserker onslaught in Yakuza 2 into a more precise form of brutal takedowns. The Dragon of Dojima's rage had become a tempered violence, building momentum in order to deal with his opponents in swift actions and using his intimidation to scare them into submission. This Kiryu was a thinking soul. There was an unprecedented maturity in forming his actions both in and out of fighting, one he was going to have to prove to the spitting image of his father figure. Obviously, this isn't Shintaro Kazama, it's his twin brother because storytelling shenanigans are afoot, but symbolically, Kiryu is surpassing his role model. He's finally coming into his own as a mentor, and this fight is a passing of the torch. The culmination of all his hard work is about to be tested. He's about to turn the tables on the man that raised him and teach him a lesson for once. With this victory, he now stands side by side with those that came before him. He's a guiding figure, a protector to those in need of his help. This is the moment Kiryu becomes a hero.
どうやら俺も年のようだな。あんたが若かったら勝てたかどうかわからんな。
Joji discloses where Daigo's being cared for, explaining that the CIA only found out a few hours ago. But before Kiryu can hop on to the next plane back to Tokyo...
Taichi, お前どうしてこんなところに?
Meanwhile, at the orphanage... Roll that back! Kill this man! Watching the people Kiryu has come to trust get hurt is difficult. Compared to when they first met, it's night and day. He cares about these folks. He's basically known them for a year or two on a daily basis. They're important to his stability and paradise. The collapsed orphanage and Nakahara's kidnapping are his paradise lost, crumbled to the ground and taken from him. Yeah, he's enraged and ready to rip anything that moves apart, but we see Kiryu wrestle with emotion. We see him in grief. For once, we see Kiryu put aside the ideas of pride and machismo for something greater.
一人前の男になりたいんだ。
気持ちはわかる。だが、今じゃないはずだ。死ぬと分かってて戦うのが一人前の男ってわけじゃない。
But you know how Yakuza stories go.
すんません、兄貴。怒らないでください。お嬢が一人でここに行こうとするもんで。
Are you fucking serious? This video's pushing 50 minutes already. Fuck it! Let's talk about the use of melodrama.
Melodrama is one of those wonderful things that inexperienced or bad writers will often use to create conflict or advance the plot. It's why melodrama tends to have negative connotations, but melodrama can be powerful in the right hands. The Yakuza series is a close to perfect example of good melodrama. Yeah, Tammy, yeah, it's been jumping the shark from day one, but every powerful moment of the series is thanks to the appropriate use of melodrama.
私はね、この子のせいで人生めちゃくちゃになったのよ。
Yakuza waits for the peaks in its crime drama stories to exaggerate the emotional impact of its scenes.
いつも見守ってくれてありがとう。
もう答えは出ていたんだ。サキはあんたの本当の娘なんだ。
It builds up the emotional intensity between characters until finally... An explosive reaction creates an emotional payoff the audience has been waiting for. Yakuza can go as over the top as it wants during its climaxes because it teases the audience before getting there. You're dying for that release so badly by the time it gets to you. You want it to be big. You want to be saturated in the moment.
Nakahara!
So when an old man throws an ox to the side like an office chair, you're excited to hear him talk trash to the bastard who put him in the pit. And you're taken aback when a young man shows an old mainlander how much he cares. Rikia and Kiryu share a final moment together, with no illusion hiding the love they have for one another.
Aniki.
It's a heartbreaking scene. Kiryu has to say goodbye to another loved one, but his reaction is stronger than we've seen before. He lets his tears fall freely, and Rikia wants Kiryu to know how much he loves him.
兄貴はかっこいい。さあ、最高に。力也。
We've been watching a story play around with aspects of toxic and positive masculinity and the relationships between men. Rikiya's comment is a direct response to Kiryu's crying. It's an appreciation for Kiryu's form of masculinity, about what makes him a greater man than any other. Even as he's dying, Rikiya is still learning from Kiryu and looking out for his well-being.
すみません。
力也。おい！力也！
But it's Kiryu who learned something here. It's okay to trust, to care and love someone. It's okay to become close to someone else again. Even if there's a chance you might get hurt, it's important to believe in others. A scene with Mine and some henchmen follows after.
なんだって？
ああ、会長。こいつが峰会長のお祝いをぜひと。
何かめでたいことでもあったか？
そりゃだって。
何がめでてんだ！六代目が死ぬのがそんなにめでてえのか？ああ。
They both make their way to the hospital Daigo is being held in, and Kiryu fights his way up to the roof where the final encounter begins.
お前大悟を殺して登場界の跡目につくつもりなんだろ。
跡目か。本当はそんなもんどうでもよかったんですがね。こんなことになっちまうとは。
Mine explains to Kiryu how alike they are.
あんたならわかるでしょ。誰からも愛されず、誰からも必要とされず、ただ孤独と向き合いながら生きていく辛さを。
His ideologies are laid bare here as well, revealing a different set of conclusions to the life he's led.
そうです。人間はみんな嘘つきで身勝手だ。いくらたくさんの人間が周りにいても、みんないつか自分の都合で勝手に離れていく。
And finally, we get down to the true motives behind Mine's actions. Love.
俺は虚しかった。目標になる人間を失った以上、次の生きがいが俺は欲しかった。
In a weird tangle of his own emotions, Mine believes killing Daigo will put his own mind at ease.
そして心に決めた。嘘だろうが何だろうが、誰にも文句を言わせないほどの力を得てやろうと。
This decision is what puts Mine and Kiryu on opposing sides, choosing the cold, detached world he knows over the intimacy and closeness being given to him. Kiryu attempts to appeal to the side of Mine that loves Daigo, insisting people are worth saving, worth protecting and loving.
人間、しがみついてでも這いつくばってでも、生きることに価値があるんだ。わかるか？
Does any of this sound familiar to you? Because it should.
Stand up and protect the one thing worth fighting for.
We're watching a deja vu here, a callback to the first Yakuza that's been foreshadowed by old enemies returning to harass Kiryu, by a shadow of a man setting Kiryu out on his journey in the first place. Kiryu isn't just trying to stop Mine from killing Daigo, he's trying to save a man at the crossroads he found himself at 4 years ago. The exchange enlightens Kiryu, why Mine feels hollow, why he's wrong about his decision, and why even Kiryu felt alone for so long before Rikiya and the orphanage.
お前は自分しか信じちゃいない。自分以外の人間を心から信じれない。だから人から愛されないんだ。
黙れ!
His words cut right through Mine, and Kiryu makes his move.
お前みたいな人間には口で説明しても伝わらない。だったら俺が俺なりのやり方でお前に教えてやる。
やっぱりあんたって人はこんな時でさえ何にも変わらない。
The irony of that first statement is Kiryu has changed over the course of the story. He's grown to be more open and emotionally available for others, while Mine has become more closed off. And yet, by accepting to fight him, Kiryu has already beaten Mine.
気持ちだけで人間どこまでやれるのか教えられるもんなら俺に教えてくださいよ。
This conversation is an intervention, a plea by Kiryu for Mine to trust him, to let someone in one more time to help. When Mine gives Kiryu the opportunity to change his mind, Kiryu has already won. And as the laws of Yakuza decree, Mine has a change of heart.
俺はのし上がったんだ。誰の力も借りず、誰も信じず。でも人間、結局誰かを信じたい。信じてもらいたい。それだけなのかもな。
The two reconcile only for Black Monday to reveal themselves.
CIA や風間の動きも奴らには全て筒抜けだった。
I'm afraid your role in all of this has come to an end.
Whoa, hey, I didn't turn on the dub.
Oh, there are plenty of people who could replace you. And unfortunately, you both know far too much for me to let either live.
This is... I don't know about this. We were sort of having a moment.
What the fuck?
なんだと？
まだ死ぬわけにはいかないんだ。俺は。
Thank you, Daigo. Much appreciated.
ミネ、お前どうしたんだ？大丈夫か？危なかったな。だがもう大丈夫だ。
The tender exchange is interrupted by the consequences of Mine's decisions. Black Monday's leader wants to go down swinging. Maybe out of love or out of the desire to do something for someone else for a change, Mine wrestles Richard Anderson to the roof's edge.
生まれ変わったら俺もそっちに入れるかな。やめろ。やめるんだ。ミネ！ミネ！
Let me go!
Daigo turns to Kiryu. His coma leaving him without answers, he asks Kiryu if Mine was the traitor in the Tojo.
いや、違う。あいつは、ミネは裏切り者なんかじゃない。
Yakuza 1 was about regaining lost innocence. Yakuza 2 was about overcoming guilt and redefining yourself. These were structured themes telling stories about specific scenarios or dilemmas. Yakuza 3 is often considered one of the more obtuse narratives. It's definitely clunky and awkward in places, and the subtext isn't well organized, and it might be because Yakuza 3 isn't about a scenario, but an emotion.
This specific emotion allows people to do extraordinary things for themselves and for those they care about. It's a quality Kiryu obtains through his relationship with Rikiya and his guardianship of the orphanage children, through helping others cross the same obstacles he has faced and investing in people besides himself. It's something Mine was never taught and lacked his entire life until he met Daigo. Yakuza 3 is about compassion.
Yakuza 3 closes the book on Kiryu's journey. The return of old faces to point him in the right direction and past enemies looking for a final opportunity to strike him down. New friends to remind him both of where he started and who he is now. Villains embodying selfishness, greed, and cruelty. A man who lost everything regained his hope, overcame his guilt, and learned to channel his intensity into a compassion for the people around him. And ultimately, he chose to help those struggling to make the same change. To believe in their ability to make the right choices, to find their way the same as Kiryu did. Compassion is essential in trust, in protecting others and supporting them and allowing them to do those things for you. It is the steadfast belief in other human beings and their ability to be better, about understanding at least partly what's going through their mind and being able to help them, or in a father's case, guide them through hard times.
お前に信じるものがあってやり直すつもりがあるなら力を貸すぜ。
そんなこと信じろってのか。
ああ。
Without compassion, none of the big, impactful moments would have happened. Rikiya wouldn't have become the man he was at the end, Kiryu would have never gotten through to Mine, and Mine would have gone through with murdering the only man he's ever loved. And that's why we see so much of the orphanage and Rikiya in Okinawa, to show that change in Kiryu before he returns to Kamurocho. Not out of vengeance, but to protect his kids, to get some answers, and he tries to do it by talking things out and convincing people to change their minds about what they're doing. He extends his compassion to Mine even after his death by keeping the treason a secret from the man Mine admired so greatly. To have Mine remembered as the person he wound up being at the end, not as the person he was before. Because that's the thing about compassion. It means little if you don't hold on to it when it betrays you.
死んじまう時は信じるとかどうとかどうでもいいんだよ。
俺は信じる。
But if you refuse to stop believing, if you're steadfast against those who take advantage of it, compassion can change someone's life.
信じる心ってのは人間死ぬ間際でも持てるんだってことを。